Here is a simple demonstration of Virtuoso's powerful database-hosted faceted browser and Microsoft's very powerful and elegant linked data explorer called Pivot. Now, in the context of this demonstration, I'm using the term linked data to describe the process of exploring relationships in an entity attribute value graph. But my underlying data model isn't the RDF variant of the RDF-Graph model, and none of the data representations that I am going to produce will be any of the known RDF formats. The reason for that is that Pivot has an alternative XML-based representation for the RDF-Graph model. And so what I'm going to do is start in Virtuoso's faceted browser using, the interface to our, RDF-based quad store. So I'm going to simply type in a text pattern like ski resorts. And I hit enter. So I get, a results page. Now the results here are simply, here are all of the entities in this database associated with the text pattern ski resorts. What I want to do is filter this result set a little bit. I simply want entities that are of type ski resort. So now I have my filtered set. What I want to do is again simply view all, get a list of all the entities that are of this particular type, and simply click on this button here, which is simply the equivalent of saying I am performing a save action. And what this action delivers is the creation of a representation of the RDF model, which is what drives Virtuoso, but the actual resulting resource type is based on the XML-based data representation from Microsoft that underlies its Entity Frameworks initiative, and is also what Pivot depends on. So what I'm going to do is take the URL of this Virtuoso hosted resource, and then I'm going to move over to Pivot. And I'm simply going to paste in the URL of this resource. And here is Pivot now acting as a front end to Virtuoso. Because this interface is much better than our raw interface, it's much easier to understand what's really going on. So for instance, you can see on the left side the various properties of these entities of type ski resort. We have beginner slopes associated with the resorts, different countries. So for instance, I may say I want Italy, Austria, and France, for instance, and basically you can see that the icons or the images, in the middle here change accordingly. And again, if I simply take France out of the mix, take Austria out of the mix, take Italy out of the mix, again, we're back to where we started. So what I want to do is actually show you what happens when you click on one of these images. In a sense, if you were looking at a more conventional demonstration from me based on the RDF model, I would have actually clicked on an identifier at this point. What Pivot cleverly does is takes the identifier out of scope in the course of your interaction. Now, if you look down the right side here, this simply describes a specific resort from the collection presented. Now, what I could actually do is actually click on one of these properties, so one of the values, of these properties. So for instance, if I clicked on altitude, what it's going to do is basically filter the data set or the entity set accordingly. Likewise, if I actually wanted to change what type of resort I was looking for specifically, or, well, in this particular case, let's look at, say, the total runs at this particular resort. I want to reduce that a little bit. Notice I've narrowed down from 2 to 1. Now, what I could do is simply clear all my filters just by hitting clear, and then you get the entire result set. I could click on this button top right and get an alternative view. So I could simply go over to properties and say, okay, there's a country property, and we have values Italy and Austria. And to the right, you can see how the presentation of data has changed accordingly. And again, I can click on an item of interest, and to the right, here are all of the properties associated with that particular item. I could also navigate backwards through the different entities this way. I could also simply click on number 3, indicating, okay, I simply want to scope my selection to a beginner slope, which is what you see here. And again, I can always clear all to get back to where I started. Another thing I could do is simply look at these slopes based on, look at the results based on the altitude of the slopes. So for the less confident, I can reduce, the slope altitude, and so my data set is narrowed down to 1. Or I can increase altitude, and as you can see, the data set changes accordingly. What I could also do is use the longest run property, and again, filter accordingly. And so as you can see, as I go down towards 5, I'm down to 1. And again, if I simply click, here is all of the information about this particular resort. So here is a very simple demonstration of what has long been a critical missing item in the general realm of linked data. A very powerful tool that allows you to understand what entity attribute value graphs actually deliver in terms of relationship navigation across entities. The little innovation here that makes this so exciting to me is the fact that I can now take a client-oriented tool that is distinct from the server, Virtuoso, and combine the capabilities of both of these products to deliver a really powerful and compelling experience. The same kind of thing I used to do about 16 years ago when combining ODBC compliant applications with different backend databases via ODBC drivers. We're now reaching a point where we can do the same thing, but instead of dealing with records in relational databases that are silos in their own right for a myriad of reasons, we simply work with network accessible data objects where the base model is an entity attribute value graph that allows you to explore multiple dimensions of relationships across a huge collection of entities.